Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike McMahon, and it's my pleasure to also welcome you to this webinar this afternoon on shape notes singing for the 21st century. We're so delighted to be presenting Deborah Carlton to present this webinar today. Deb is well known to all of us in the Hymn Society. We certainly know her from her wonderful stint as executive director of the society. And I have to say, just personally, when I observed her in her role as executive director, having had some experience in a similar kind of role, I was always in awe of the tremendous leadership that she gave to our organization. I'm grateful for that today, and it was a little intimidating actually to come in shortly after Deb's time as executive director, but just very grateful for all that she's done, and really excited for what she's going to be sharing with us today, which is related to her doctoral research. And it's interesting. It's clear that both the topic and the presenter have generated a lot of interest. I was just telling them before that we went on the air that just in the last 2 weeks, we've generated 30 more registrations for this session today beyond what we had registered before when people registered for the entire series. So we're just delighted to be here with us today, and take it away.
Thank you, Mike, for that very kind introduction. You've just raised my stress level just a little bit more with knowing that there are even more people tuned in. But I'll deal with it. Brian, thank you for inviting me to participate in this series. I really am delighted to connect with everyone today. And I hope you'll enjoy discovering some old tunes that could be fresh ones for today's church. It may be helpful to start by defining exactly what we mean by shape note tunes. The name refers to music notated with shape note heads, a triangle, oval, square, and a diamond, called fa, sol, la, and mi. These are placed on a conventional music staff with conventional rhythmic notation, the same as in modern round note notation. Shape note music is also called fa, sol, la music because of these syllables. More specifically, however, to our purpose, it generally refers to a body of music collected in the early to mid-19th century in oblong shaped tune books, and having a distinctive musical sound. More about that in just a moment. The focus of my presentation today is, while a goodly number of shape note tunes have gathered popularity in current hymnals over the past several decades, there are still many singable and memorable tunes in this genre to be recovered and used in today's congregational singing. Poets, listen to these tunes. Perhaps they will inspire some new texts. Arrangers, here are tunes in public domain for you to set as anthems or instrumental pieces. Ministers and directors of music, there are resources of easily learned tunes to pair with new texts that you'd like to have your congregation sing, or perhaps breathe new life into an older text with one of these energetic folk tunes. Examples today will come from the two most popular tune books. B.F. White's The Sacred Harp, we'll be using the 1991 edition, and William Walker's The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, first published in 1835, but we will be using the 1854 reprint edition that's available from the University of Kentucky Press. Most of the examples you'll see will be from the Southern Harmony, so that we can see them in their 19th century settings before everything was edited and upgraded and filled out and corrected in the Sacred Harp. Brian, do we have a poll? We'll find out if what sort of background you might have.
All right, it looks like 7 people know very little. 13 recognize some tunes from the tradition. 22 have been to a shape note sing, and 5 have led shape note singing.
Ooh. Okay, well, just for, we've got about 40, 35% who have little experience. So let me do just a bit of background. And yeah, the 19th century oblong tune books stand in the larger tradition of the singing school movement, which started in New England in the 18th century as an effort to teach people to sing better in church. Singing school masters compiled these tune books as their textbooks. An opening introduction to music theory was followed by a collection of simple hymn tunes and more complicated tunes and anthems towards the back of the book. The compilers included their own compositions and other works that were popular. They had to sell these books, after all. By the time of the start of the 19th century, singing schools had moved from urban centers in the Northeast to the rural countryside and were moving southward and westward following the camp meeting revivals. New itinerant singing school masters still compiled their tune books and still gathered selections from other collections, but now they were including a significant number of folk tunes. Even some of the composed pieces were in a folk style. The why of the shift to folk tunes is a topic for another day's conversation. The oblong shape note tune books of the early 19th century are a rich repository of the full range of early American folk tunes, from Yankee tunesmiths like William Billings to the European-trained composers such as Lowell Mason. The folk tunes also cover a range of types. There are easily recognized arrangements of folk songs from the British Isles. There are adapted songs from folk sources, or there are pieces composed in a folk style. There are also camp meeting tunes with choruses of hallelujahs and traveling refrains. That is, choruses that pop up with a number of different texts. Please note that we are focusing today on the first half of the 19th century, during which the system of 4 shapes was used and folk tunes were plentiful. Shape note traditions continued throughout the century and still exist, but shifted after the Civil War to a 7-shape system that's more closely related to gospel music. And now we're at this next slide here. Credit for recognizing the folk sources of these tunes goes first to George Pullen Jackson, professor of German at Vanderbilt University. He became interested in the Sacred Harp singings in Tennessee and with Alan Lomax made recordings of the singings. He's generally credited with the term white spirituals in reference to shape note singing or fasolas singing. He traced these tunes to folk origins and helped establish families of shape note tunes. Others, such as Dorothy Horn, further researched the folk song basis of these tunes and analyzed the dyadic rather than triadic harmonies and compositional structures of the tunes. The Hymn Society's own fellow, David W. Music, has also researched the folk tune repertoire, and his study of 80 folk tunes offers in-depth discussion of each tune, its publication history, its many variants, and musical form. It's from this early 19th century body of folk songs and folk-like songs that we'll draw examples today. I'd ask you to refer to the resource sheet in your handouts for a full citing of these studies and others. My premise today is that you can use these tunes in two ways. First, you can use just the tune on its own without the harmonization in the tune book and use it unaccompanied or with your own harmonization. Because they are folk-based, the harmonizations can be quite simple, so most of us can figure out a few chords to underpin the melody. If composition is your thing, take off with whatever alternate harmonies and color chords you hear. Another approach is to use the tune and harmonization as it appears in the tune book. For that approach, we may need to establish a bit of foundation, especially for those of you who are coming with little experience in shape note sound and singing. If you're an old hand at fossil law singing, bear with us for just a moment. A word about the mechanics of score reading and performance practice. The compositional practice harkens back to late medieval compositional styles in many ways. The melody is in the tenor line. It seems evident that the melody came first, and then a bass line was composed to provide a simple harmonic skeleton. The earliest of the Southern shape note tune books had many two-part settings, such as Power, seen here, from Wyeth's Repository of Sacred Music, Part 2nd, published in 1820. The next generation of tune book compilers, which included William Walker and B.F. White, added a third voice, the treble, composed as a counter melody to the tenor. Four-part settings are very sparse in early and mid-19th century books, and the added part, called counter, is scored between the tenor and the treble, so it looks like an alto part. In fact, it was not until the 1911 edition of the Sacred Harp that all of the selections in the book were four-part settings. The compositional style is clearly linear and relates to the melody rather than being conceived with a vertical chord structure. There are many voice crossings, dissonances, and cadences with open octaves or open fifths. These tunes are best described as modal rather than major or minor. Nearly all are either Aeolian, that is, the white keys from A to A on a piano, or perhaps you'd call it natural minor, or Ionian, white keys from C to C, and you could call that major. It's true for all the tunes we're going to look at today that they either fall into Aeolian or Ionian mode. So we're going to pass over some of the more unusual modal tunes. You can explore those on your own. Nearly all of the tunes use a gapped scale, either pentatonic, 5 tones, or hexatonic, 6 tones. And in fact, this is a characteristic in general of folk melodies. The bass part is generally sung by men only. The tenor, treble, and counterparts are doubled at the octave by both men and women. So this is one factor in creating the typical fossil law sound. At singings, the singers face each other in an open square. The leader stands in the middle to give the beat, and one of the elders sets the pitch, rarely the pitch as it's printed on the page. My professor of blessed memory, Hugh McElrath, called them keys of convenience. The pitch is then repeated by the singers, and the singing starts. They sing first by the notes, that is, singing the solfege syllables. Then they sing by the line, singing the text. The singing style might be described as enthusiastic, full-throated, rhythmically emphatic. Now that, in a nutshell, is the 19th century style for fossil law music, and modern choirs often find it enjoyable to sing tunes as they are harmonized in the tune books. Most don't, however, try to sing the shapes. There is a range of singing styles and nuances in published recordings of the repertoire. I thought it might be fun to hear just a little bit of that range. First, here is a bit of video from Holly Springs Sacred Harp Singing, held in Holly Springs Primitive Baptist Church in Bremen, Georgia. This was filmed in 1982 by Alan Lomax. If you know anything about shape note sacred harp singings, you've probably recognized the name of Hugh McGraw. He was associated with Sacred Harp Publishing for many years and was present at so many singings around the country. I was there 3 years later for the annual singing in June and found it quite an experience. The opening music you heard today was Green Street, a field recording I made on a little cassette machine. We were in a wooden frame building, wooden benches, about 100 singers packed in. The room pulsed with the music. So here now, a short example from 1982 at Holly Springs.
Thank you. Who did I call?
Tom Harper.
Yeah, Tom Harper.
Oh, no.
Followed by
That's it, Tom.
Mark
411.
Slater.
411.
411. Glad to have you, Mr. Tom. Thank you, sir.
Brian, can you put up for us the next slide of New Britain? Now here's a more familiar tune for you. Amazing Grace, sung by Southern Harmony singers in Benton, Kentucky. Listen for the way the tenor and the treble cross back and forth in the same range. You'll hear the leader, Glenn Wilcox, call by the notes, and then later by the line. Dr. Glenn Wilcox was professor of music at Murray State University and one of the leaders of the big singing in Benton for many years. He edited the current reprint of Southern Harmony listed on your resource page. So let's listen to a bit of this recording. Brian, is there a way to leave the slide up while the recording plays?
Yes, just bear with me just a second.
Sure. The other recording. There you go.
by the note.
These folk songs have caught the attention of other performance ensembles like the Tudor Choir and the Boston Camerata. Let's hear how members of the Boston Camerata perform New Britain. In this recording, entitled New Britain, The Roots of American Folk Song, Joel Cohen and his ensemble explore the British and European antecedents of a range of American folk songs. This performance captures the folk essence of the tune. They don't specify the source for their version of New Britain, but it retains some of the dissonances found in earlier uncorrected settings. Brian, if you'll play that Boston Camerata recording and lead New Britain up. Brian, you can figure it out, please. Okay. Thank you, Brian, for being my sound engineer today. Well, with that short introduction, let's turn to consider the tunes that are in the present repertoire as reflected in the selection of current hymnals. I have an Excel file that shows in spreadsheet form some of the tunes that are appearing in current hymnals. Brian, there's the second.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, wrong one.
Yeah, it's all right.
There we go.
Okay. So the codes across the top are different hymnals. There's a key at the bottom to explain better what all those acronyms are. But you can see I used the Baptist Hymnal 91, Celebrating Grace, the Chalice Hymnal, Community of Christ Sings, Glory to God, the Hymnal 1982, Lutheran Book of Worship from 1978, Evangelical Lutheran Worship from 2006, the Methodist Hymnal, and then the supplement, Worship and Song, the New Century Hymnal, Worship 4th edition, African American Heritage Hymnal, and One Lord, One Faith, One Baptism. I regret that my copy of Voices Together, the New Mennonite Hymnal, did not arrive in time for me to add that brand new hymnal into the count, but you can check that out too. This is by no means a comprehensive study of hymnals, but a representation across the spectrum. If you look in the line that's highlighted in green, you'll see that some of the tunes are getting overworked. Please, folks, we have enough texts set to Beach Spring. We're going to sample another option in just a bit. You'll also note that nearly all the tunes in current usage can be found either in the Sacred Heart or Southern Harmony or both. So those two tune books are excellent resources if you want to explore this tradition. A word here about tune names. There were dozens of tune books in the South. In the 19th century, copyright enforcement was not so well observed. Borrowing from other books was common. Compilers would sometimes take a tune and reharmonize it and give it another name, or come upon a tune in one region known by one name, and the same tune, or a variant, known by another name in another area. So you'll see that foundation, the tune for which we sing, How Firm a Foundation, has different names in our two tune books, and the tune is set to different words in Southern Harmony. You can have two or more different tunes with the same name, even in the same tune book, or you might encounter two different names for the same tune. In Southern Harmony, Jerusalem and Wesley are the same tune with just a few rhythmic differences. Even in our modern hymnals, we have Consolation and Morning Song, the same tune, but different sources were used when that tune was being selected for a hymnal. There are also examples of the same tune, but in different modes. And we have one current example. You'll find Promised Land. We sing that too on Jordan's stormy banks I stand. In Aeolian mode in both Sacred Harp and Southern Harmony. It shifted to major mode late in the 19th century in keeping with Southern gospel styles. And so that's how it's come to us in current hymnals. You might try sometime shifting that tune to minor and see how it feels with those same words. While some of these tunes have been heavily used, others should be used more. Let me encourage you to get to know Dunlap's Creek, Kedron, Prospect, and Vernon. We're going to sing our way through these tunes on whatever syllable you prefer. A word of caution to any of you who enjoy perfect pitch. You are about to get a headache. I'm sorry. We will not be singing at the pitches you're seeing. Or maybe you could just count this as a good exercise in transposition on sight. So we'll start with Dunlap's Creek. Good. I just wanted to say, I'm also going to set these tunes, I'm going to try to set these tunes fairly low so that you may feel more comfortable mumbling along at home on these tunes. I'm going to sing through the tune one time just so that you can hear it and then go back and sing it again. And I would encourage you that if you haven't already jumped in, that you sing at home on the repeat. La 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 la. La 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 la. Be sure to sing on the middle, staff, and join me. La 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 la. La 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 Right, we'll move on to Kedron. You'll find that down on the bottom of the page. Let me mention before we sing, towards the end, you see some tiny little notes 3 measures before the end. That's the way that shape note tradition notes kind of a sort of a grace note kind of passing tone. So that's why they're much smaller. La 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 As we sing Prospect, you'll see that we have another example of an 8th note followed by a dotted quarter or just a quarter. This sort of Scotch snap was very popular in the books. We had one in Kedron. We'll see it here, and whether or not that was always in the folk tune or whether it was added as an ornament, but it has sort of that feel to it of an ornament. La 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 Move on to Vernon. Some of these tunes may be more familiar to you, particularly if you're a regular at Hymn Society conferences. But I would encourage you to check out some of the others that we're not seeing through today, and you may be able to add those tunes as well to your repertoire. In Vernon, I need to point out the repeat. There's a common practice in the shape note tradition. If there was the same tune to be sung twice to different sets of words, it's notated just one time. You'll see that heavy bar at the middle of the tune, and you see 2 sets of words underneath the tenor line. So we'll sing that first phrase, go back and sing different words to that same tune, and then move ahead with the rest of the tune. You also will note 2 dots, the heavy bar line, and then 2 dots to the right side. that is a repeat sign. And in Sacred Harp tradition, folks would repeat the second half of the melody, I think, just to have a little bit more time to enjoy the melody. But since there's just one set of words, there's no extra text to go back. We'll just sing through one time without that final repeat. La 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 Sing with me. La 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 la. Now, Samantha is one of my all-time favorites, so we have to sing it today. I'm delighted that there are two modern texts for this ballad-like AABA melody in Aeolian mode. Joy Patterson's setting, Isaiah the prophet has written of old, is found in Glory to God, and Fred Pratt Green's When Jesus Came Preaching the Kingdom of God is found in Worship, 4th edition. The rounded bar form is a familiar folk tune form and makes the tune easily learned because you sing the same bit of melody 3 times in the tune. I'm trying to make sure we don't end up too far in the stratosphere on this tune when it goes up. I'd like to set that up just a little bit. That may be too low. Let's try it here. Right hand. Well, let me stop here and check and see if there are any questions in the Q&A that we should deal with, or any comments in the chat. Brian, you're going to help me curate that part, right?
I am. There's nothing currently in the Q&A that we need to deal with, although there are some comments that you may want to hear that have come in along the way. For instance, apparently the hymnal 1982 has Detroit in the minor key.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure who said that. Jan. And then someone wanted to know the name of the Boston group from the recording. That's the Boston Camerata. And then Sarah Sellers says at 3:44, which must have been when we were doing this last tune, that she learned it as his voice, as the sound of the dulcimer suite.
That is, and if you put the tune back up, you'll see those words. If you can do that without too much trouble. So one of the reasons why we're singing things on la 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 instead of singing the words is that often when you have more than one stanza of text, the stanza 1 is underneath the treble and stanza 2 is underneath the tenor. And then multiple other stanzas are written at the bottom of the page. I really just didn't want you to have to exercise the independent eye movement too much to follow words in one place and tune in another place. But also because many of these texts from the 19th century are not texts we would bring forward. Maybe this one you might find a place because it is biblical, but I figured in terms of learning these new tunes, it would be easier just to focus on the melody itself. But Sarah, you're exactly right. His voice as the sound of the dulcimer suite is heard through the shadow of death. Cedars of Lebanon bow at his feet, the air is perfumed with his breath. And that is, it's a lovely text to just sing through. Again, I think its worship usage would be limited. But the other texts are set to this tune, Samantha. So thanks for that comment, Sarah. I'm glad you're in on the call today, on the webinar.
And Lucy Goman says that Joy Patterson's text set to that tune can be found in the Episcopal Supplement, Wonder, Love, and Praise.
Great.
And then somebody else, I'm struggling to see names, Rachel Hall says that the Southern Harmony is available for download, and then she provides a link in the chat.
Oh, well,
So folks are throwing in all sorts of extra information.
Yeah, well, just a word about download. There is a relatively new tune book that came out that's called the Shenandoah Harmony. I put that in the resource page. It is not a 19th century book. It is a modern compilation from a number of different sources, focusing on the tune books of Ananias Davison. But that Shenandoah Harmony is also available for download. So we've got some 21st century technology going on here with these old tunes.
So now we do have 3 questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
Sarah Sellers Golson wants to know, can you sing one from Cold Mountain?
Not today, Sarah.
All right, not today. But that is a wonderful modern day usage of shape note tunes. Lunette Arledge, sorry. What's the purpose of the different shapes?
So the shapes indicate different degrees of the scale. If you were to sing a major scale, you would sing fa sol la mi fa. Now, I don't want to get into why there are only 4 shapes and seven steps or 8 steps of the scale, but this is the way they did it in the 19th century. It actually harkens back to very early, even Guidonian solfege kinds of systems with just four shapes. And it was supposedly having the different degrees of the scale indicated by different shape note heads was intended to be an aid in learning to read the music. There have been some studies done with regard to whether shape note singers really are reading what the shapes they see on the page, or whether they've just learned this in oral tradition. And that probably is another whole webinar we could have. But sacred harp singers, I would just like to note, in any experience that I've seen, if you put a brand new tune in front of them, they just look at it and go. So I think that in some parts of the shape note singing traditions, they really are using the shapes to help them sight read. That's the premise of it. I hope that answered at least part of your question.
And then the last thing in the Q&A for now is Meryl Smoke asks, have you been to a Benton, Kentucky big singing in recent years? Although not over the last 8 months, I assume.
No, big singing is on the fourth Sunday in May every year. And Meryl, I regret to say I have not been in quite a few years. I know that things are changing there in terms of the tradition, and some of the things that I note in my dissertation maybe wouldn't apply quite so strongly. The family orientation of big singing is maybe diminishing some as more and more singers come and join from other traditions. Have you been able to go? If you have, perhaps you could give me an update on how things are going, maybe by an email or put something in the chat. So Brian, anything else we need to?
Yeah, one more question in the Q&A, and then we'll move on. Lisa Kripe says, could those four shapes be related to the 2 4-note tetrachords which join to make a scale?
That's exactly it.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. That's where it comes from. The whole, they don't use the whole tetrachord kind of theory, but that's the concept behind it.
All right.
Okay, so let's look now at some tunes that haven't made it into current hymnals. At least I don't think they're in current hymnals. But perhaps they deserve to be included in future volumes. So Brian, I'll ask you to put that other spreadsheet up for just a moment. Thank you. I found so many good tunes. It was really hard for me to limit this list. And I put a few in that are in a fairly unusual meter, and some that are in longer meters. But I've tried to focus on noting both an Aeolian and an Ionian example of tunes in the more prevalent meters of common meter, long meter, and short meter, and their doubled forms. We're going to sing through just a few of them, melody only, to whet your appetite, to get hold of a tune book and discover some others. My good friend, Jackie Jones, accepted my request, or maybe I should say my challenge, to write a new text to fit one of these tunes. In fact, she got so excited about the tunes I sent her, she offered me 2 unpublished texts. And so I'm delighted to say we're going to share them with you today at the end. But let's look at the list. And now, Brian, if you'll switch back to the slides. I'll say while he's putting that up that some of you said the Excel files were difficult for you to open. And so I've sent them out, or had, thankfully, Stephen Blondo sent them out to you in PDF format. You won't be able to view them as comfortably in the PDF format, but if that's what you need to do, it's at least there. But if you can download the Excel file, you'll be able to manipulate that and make it useful for you. Maybe add your own notes, or add other things to it as you discover them along the way. All right, we're gonna look at crucifixion. Some of you may have sung this as an anthem. I believe that's the way I learned it. A new text would really be a challenge in this meter. Okay, good, we're back. But the original words perhaps could be used during Lent or Holy Week, and maybe with some text editing involved. The first thing to notice about this score is that the text underlay leaves quite a bit to be desired. Unfortunately, this is typical for shape notebooks, so you just have to get used to their notational shorthand. You have the first phrase clearly laid out, and then a repeat sign. So that just indicates to use the same words as in the first phrase. Then you take the text one note to a syllable, unless there is a slur. And you'll see a couple of slurs in the melody. So the notes of the tune and the words you're going to sing will not line up exactly, but let me demonstrate how this would be. Saw ye my Savior, saw ye my Savior, saw ye my Savior and God. Oh, he died on Calvary to atone for you and me, and to purchase our pardon with blood. Would you like to try this with me? Saw ye my Savior, saw ye my Savior, saw ye my Savior and God. Oh, he died on Calvary to atone for you and me, and to purchase our pardon with blood. All right, I promised you an alternative to Beach Spring, and here it is, as Olney. I thought perhaps that we could also sing these words. This is a text that we occasionally still sing. I'm going to ask Brian about the display. I'm getting gray squares and rectangles. Okay, that's a little better. So I think you can see all of the melody around the gray blackout lines. I'm assuming those are transmission issues. Come, thou fount of every blessing, Tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount, oh fix me on it, mount of thy redeeming love. Sorry, unchanging love as it's printed here. Sing with me. Come now, fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount, oh fix me on it, mount of thy unchanging love. Now, moving on to Primrose. This is we saw this page before when we sang Kedron, but now we'll look at the top of the page. La 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 la. The next tune we'll sing is French Broad. Now, let's see. Brian, can you move that long rectangular bar? Move it down some. Well,
Is that better?
well, I was trying to get to the note across the bottom, but if it won't go down, we'll just, all right. You'll have to trust me. This tune was written by William Walker, and he has a note at the bottom of the page that says, thank you, that it was written in the fall of 1831 while traveling over the mountains on the French Broad River in North Carolina and Tennessee. So just gives you a little glimpse into how some tune names are selected. Rivers are unusual to be the source of tune names, but here we have one. All right. Too high. Albion can be sung exactly as it's rhythmically notated. And I'm going to sing it through the way it's notated the first time. But when we go back in the repeat, I'm going to change the whole note that you see at the end of the first phrase to a half note and then disregard that half rest and continue on. I think this makes the tune have a better sense of unity. But of course, you can sing it either way. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 ba, da, 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 so let's try that again, and we'll shorten that middle part and ignore that rest. Okay. And I thought you could also sing these words if you like. You just have to look above the tune. So you can either la 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 or sing the words, whatever you prefer. Come ye that love the Lord, and let your joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord, and thus around the throne, and thus around the throne. So this is one that you could carry the words forward or set to a different text. And now I'm really excited to present to you two texts, unpublished texts written by Jackie Jones. And we'll have fun singing her new words to the tune. We'll sing through the entire text so that you can enjoy her text as well as learning the tune. Yes, this is Amity. Bartimaeus by the road, poverty your crushing load. Sight once prized is long since gone, begging now you struggle on. Blind of eye with seeing heart, hearing is your better part. For your eyes alert and keen, hear the voice of one unseen. Son of David, look my way. Come have mercy, this I pray. No compassion from the crowd. Quiet man, don't shout so loud. Son of David, don't pass by. Come have mercy, hear my cry. Call him here, the teacher said. By your hand let him be led. Threadbare cloak you cast away, leap to hear the teacher say. What is it you ask of me? Teacher, once more let me see. From the dusty ancient street, where these two men chanced to meet, came the words we now retell. Go, your faith has made you well. Bartimaeus, sight regained, once enslaved, no longer chained. Grasp again what you had lost, but redemption has a cost. Offer choices you can make. Which direction will you take? That will come, but for today, follow Jesus on the way. The second text that we have for today, I think, would be an appropriate text coming into Lent. So, if I don't give out completely in the voice. An intersection evil made, where ignorance prevails, where greed and pride and fear have formed a cross of wood and nails. The Nazarene dying there with pain distorted face. On Calvary, perhaps the world's most God-forsaken place. Who is this man who once proclaimed God's kingdom on the earth, assuring people robbed of hope that every life has worth? Is this God's heart upon the cross, the child of Mary's womb? What does it take the God of all to lie within a tomb? An intersection God has made with reconciling grace, where justice and forgiveness now reveal God's loving face. With all we gather at that cross, though emptied now and bare, and offer thanks with every breath to one who suffered there. I want to thank Jackie again for her contribution to my presentation today. We had lots of fun looking at different tunes and possible pairings, and I hope you enjoyed singing her text. Please note that you can use them with permission from GIA. And thanks to all of you who joined the webinar today. I think we may have a minute or two for questions and comments. And Brian, I'll turn it back to you for that.
All right. I don't see anything in the chat that's in the form of a question. Primrose is in glory to God, someone thinks, with the text where charity and love prevail.
I thoroughly confess to any omissions you might find after a while looking at hymnal indexes and back and forth.
Lots of thanks, accolades of the text, and nothing is in the Q&A. So if anyone wants to bring anything up, now's the chance. Mary Jensen says, I enjoy the Mel Bay book, Early American for Hymns. Here's a question. E. Ray Bryant says, are there current places where one can hear this music sung in churches?
Oh, churches. Well, I suppose if you happen to land on a church singing one of these tunes in their worship, but to my knowledge, I don't know of any sort of compendium of congregational settings of these tunes.
Rachel Hall says you can come to Shape Note singings. All are welcome.
There you go.
And we do have a question from one of your oldest, dearest friends, Alan Burton. I'm assuming that's the same Alan Burton. And he says, what would be your suggestion to use this in our local churches?
Well, first of all, I would say that the tunes themselves are easy to introduce. I would be careful, I think, and do some good spade work, maybe with a choir or with a group of singers. If you wanted to sing it in a shape note style, with the shape note harmonization, I would tend to use an ensemble or a choir to present that. But in terms of using the tune, I think you could just use it either with a familiar text, just to change up the text and tune pairing, or you could use the folk tune to introduce a newly written text. I think one of the advantages of using the folk tunes is that we have a good sense, just innately in us, a good sense of where those tunes are going to go and how they're going to come to a cadence, the interval structures, and so many of them start bom, bom, or da, da, dum, or they outline a triad to begin. And so it's somewhere deep in our DNA that we sort of understand how these folk tunes work. So they're not very threatening to introduce to a congregation, and really can't, because there's often repetitions of major portions of the tune. The learning process is much quicker. For instance, if you use that rounded bar form, you have the same melody 3 times and only one contrasting phrase of melody, so that people can pick up the tune fairly quickly. And that's how I would encourage you to use it. Use them just as a tune, rather than trying to embed them in the shape note singing sort of sound. And save that if you want to introduce that shape note sound with the very rhythmic singing and with the harmonization as it is in the tune book. Do that with the choir, at least at first.
I will add one thing. I've dealt with a lot of small choirs, and if you only have like one tenor, like using these 3-part things where you can intentionally have various voice parts singing the same part, even if they're an octave off, like, can be really useful if you need, a good 3-part setting.
And it gives a very full sound to have voices doubled at the octave.
We have some more questions coming in, so I'm going to try to organize them. Deb Steiner asks, how many active shape note singing groups are there and where? I'm going to put a link in the chat that might be helpful.
Yeah, I would say you can find a shape note singing in your area, no matter where you live, unless maybe you live in the mountains in Wyoming or something. But the Sacred Harp is the most prevalent singing tune book that's used in singing. But you can find Christian Harmony in Tennessee. You can go to Benton, Kentucky and sing from the Southern Harmony, 4th Sunday in May. There used to be a directory of Sacred Harp shape note singings. You may still be able to find that on the website, where communities have sort of mapped out their territory, and the first Sunday in March will be at one location, the second Sunday in March will be in another location, so that you could pretty much go to a Sacred Harp singing almost every week of the year if you're willing to travel around a bit.
Rachel Hall from Philadelphia says, as someone coming from the shape note traditions, I miss the Watts and Wesley texts. Are there general reasons that they're not used? And my apologies if this is a longer question than can be answered here.
Well, There is some Watts and Wesley that's carried forward. I mean, some of the texts we still do sing. We often sing them to a different tune than the tune from the shape note tradition. So you might be able to repair that's the wrong word. Repair sounds like you're going to fix it. You could pair again the text and the tune, and people would recognize the text and they might recognize the tune, but put those together. The other part of the answer is more theological, and yes, maybe longer than we can deal with here, but I would just say that for many congregations, the theology expressed in Watts especially, and in some of the other writers from that same period, maybe not Watts himself, but others in that period, a number of congregations would not be comfortable with the theology expressed in those texts. Other congregations might be perfectly happy there. So it's just, that would vary from one context to another.
I don't see any other questions. There's nothing in the Q&A, and I've been trying to keep an eye on the chat. Some people have been putting in some helpful suggestions to some of the questions to follow up on some things. So I think that just about does it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brian, for all of your technical expertise. I really appreciate your help with that. And thanks to everyone who joined in today.
So I think we're going to listen to a little Green Street on our way out, right? From your field recording?
Right.
All right. Here we go. Thanks for attending, everyone. Check out our free webinars for the Center for Congregational Song and the rest of this webinar series through the Hymn Society at our websites, congregationalsong.org or thehymnsociety.org. Goodbye.